Charles, do you have a son?
I do.
Yeah.
I also have a daughter.
So what is true? Now you should tell us. I only have daughters, so I don't know. What you should tell us. What have you heard in those terms?
I haven't investigated that yet.
Maybe you could ask OO. He could be with the most latest information on these things.
His OO is a grandfather, so...
What is coming on the front line then?
Well, we are walking the journey of the late Archbishop Janan Luwum, who was commemorated today. Also discussing, of course, the release of the members of Parliament, Alan Sewanyana and Muhammad Segrinya.
Okay.
Frontline. Every year on the 16th of February, Ugandans celebrate the life of the former Church of Uganda Archbishop Janan Luwum. Luwum was a vocal critic of the excesses of the Idi Amin regime, especially the arbitrary killings and unexplained disappearances of Ugandans at the hands of the suspected state operatives. On the 16th of February 1977, Luwum was arrested together with two others, never to be seen alive again, although the official account says the trio died in a car crash. It is believed that he was murdered on the orders of then-President Idi Amin. 46 years later, a public holiday is celebrated, religiously attended by leaders of all stripes, all of them singing praises for Luwum's fight for human rights. Ironically, the alleged illegal detentions, torture, disappearances and killings are back in force today, happening right under the nose of the very leaders that eulogized Archbishop Luwum so eloquently year in, year out. The state security and intelligence apparatus have time and again denied any links to these acts, yet somehow they have failed to apprehend and bring to book the people illegally detaining and torturing Ugandans, which begs the question, has the government failed on its duty to protect Ugandans? Are we on our own? And what of today's men of the cloth? Have they maintained the good Archbishop's fearlessness fight for rights, or have they jumped in bed with the oppressor? Does Luwum sleep ease in his grave, or is he tossing and turning at the state of the country he loved so well? This is The Frontline. NBS Frontline. Frontline.
A very good evening and welcome to this edition of the NBS Frontline. My name is Charles Mwangushampagi. And tonight we begin the exploration, the commemoration of the death of Archbishop Janani Luwum. So many years later, what exactly does it mean? What lessons have been learned? And what is there to reflect on so many years later? Of course, we had the release of members of parliament on bail, Alan Sewanyana and Muhammad Segrinya, by the High Court in Masaka after 17 months in detention. The contestations over their right, they say the interpretation of the law is you have a right to apply for bail, but the grant of that right is discretionary depending on the judicial officer you're appearing before. But what does that mean, the prolonged and very drawn-out battle to get them out? Tonight, to discuss that with me, I have from Kira Municipality, from the Forum for Democratic Change, a frontliner, the Honorable Ibrahim Ssemuju, very dressed down, which is very rare for him, but it's a public holiday, so very nice to have you, sir.
Thank you, Charles.
I have from the Alliance for National Transformation, former presidential candidate, the Honorable Major General Gregory Mugisha Muntu. Very nice to have you, sir.
Thank you. Good evening, dear viewers.
And from the Uganda Media Center, frontliner, and from Tororo, I should add.
Tororo?
Yes.
Why didn't you say the district where I come from?
You? No, you come from Kira municipality. He comes from Tororo.
I come from Mulanda.
Mulanda. Mulanda is going to be made a district. Ofono Pondo, very nice to have you.
Thank you. Good evening to our viewers.
And let me start with you, Mr. Ofono Pondo. It's almost 46 years later, and we're discussing the murder of Archbishop Janan Luwum, the recognition of the February 16th as a public holiday is less than 3 years old now, I think?
No. It was declared in, I think, 2015.
2015?
Yeah.
So 2015, that would give us about 8 years.
8 years.
Of commemoration. Looking back, what is there to commemorate? Why is it important?
Well, first of all, I just need to correct you. It is now 47 years.
47 years. Mm-hmm.
47 years. First of all, I think this was the first such case in our country where a high-profile religious person, ordinarily not political, that such a person meets their death at the hands of the state or under suspicious circumstances, that leaves no doubt that the state had a hand. Why? Because apart from the pastoral letter that Archbishop Luwum had written expressing concern about governance issues, brutality, disappearances, and remember, 77, there had been ample time of, again, high-profile people who had disappeared or had been murdered. Among them, the then Chief Justice Ben Kiwanuka, who disappeared in 1972. I remember James Ochola, Minister for Regional Government. He had gone to collect his letters from a post office in Tororo, and was grabbed by uniformed men and was never seen. Frank Muzo, the Vice Chancellor of Makerere University, and many, many other people. So there was cumulative numbers of high-profile people who had either disappeared completely and presumed dead, like that Ochola, Karimuzo, their bodies were never found, and or people who had died in those circumstances, shot and left, and so on. So, but in this particular case, Archbishop was paraded alongside all the bishops of the Church of Uganda and the Catholic prelate at what we now call Serena Hotel, precisely Committee Room B, where they read to them accusations against them, undermining government and seeking to overthrow the government of Uganda by force of arms. And a day later, they are pronounced dead in a motor accident. So I think because of that high profileness, it became necessary, particularly the movement from the Anglican Church in Uganda, Church of Uganda, to have recognition. And they had worked their way through the Church of England and so on, and secured a declaration of Janan Luwum as a saint, as a martyr who had died for truth, for religion. And the government accepted that that should be. And so we are here celebrating Janan Luwum as a martyr. The only thing I see missing is that Janan Luwum was murdered on the same day in the same vehicle with 2 other prominent people.
Also from Acholi?
No. One is from Acholi, Erina Orema, who was the minister of Land and Minerals. He's from what is now Nwoya. But both of them had originally come from Kitgum, both Janan Luwum and Erina Orema. Erina Orema was also our first Uganda black Inspector General of Police. He came in 1963-64, up to 1971. Actually, Amin found him the Inspector General of Police of Uganda. And Amin made him minister soon after the coup. By the time of his death, he was the longest serving minister.
In the Amin government?
Yes, in the Amin government, was the only one who had served consistently from 1971 January to February when he was killed. Now, Oboto
February 1977.
77. Oboto Fumbi incidentally comes from Rwanda. We are just a kilometer and a half apart. He rose to being a permanent secretary, you call them Secretary for Defense, immediately after independence. Amin found him with the acting Minister of Defense. He retained him and subsequently reshuffled him and made him Minister for Interior, or what today we call Minister of Internal Affairs. And so that's the story. So I think that's why. I think it is the reason we could be celebrating, what we should be celebrating is that when people, especially the ones who are non-political, but even the ones who are political, if they stand for truth in the face of adversity, I think it is important to recognize them, to give, how would I call it, to give lessons to future people that standing for what you believe in, the truth, what you believe in is important. It leads to many people making commitments, and as a result of their death, many people who were in exile and here made a resolve that we cannot have a government of this type that can pounce on a prelate. We all know that, personally I think prelates are politicians, but of a different type. But in our society, people don't believe that they can get involved in politics because generally they don't show, in overt way.
Thank you. And I'll come back to you in a moment. Let me come to General Mugisha Muntu and ask, what is the significance of this day from where you sit, where you stand?
Well, thank you, Charles, and good evening again, dear viewers. I think the day to me should be a day where we should reflect, look at our history, and learn lessons from our history. But also to indicate that that was in '77. I think that was at the height of the weakness in the Amin regime. And when you look at the history of most autocratic regimes or dictatorships, there is a point where, because of internal pressures, external pressures, regimes become more and more frightened because of the challenges they face. And they become more and more paranoid. And they also engage in extreme actions to cause fear. Because at that point in time, I mean, look, these were not even military officers that the regime should have feared that they could pull off a coup or anything like that. There have been, allegations that there were, internal contradictions within the military, and there are those who are trying to deal with the military to see if they could pull off a coup. But when you have like an archbishop and you conduct an operation to eliminate an archbishop and 2 ministers, to me it reflects more the weakness of a regime, the level of fright that they were at that time, and the level of paranoia. Because when you see a regime start carrying out extreme actions of that nature, because at that point, actually, that's when the external forces and the internal forces were galvanized, including the international community, to reach a decision to say, Amin's government should go. Because thereafter, I think it took a year or 2. That's when Amin made another mistake of attacking Kagera, Sariant. And that's what the end of the regime. So we need to learn lessons from all that.
For Amini's regime, there had been a 1972 disappearance of Benedicto Kiwanuka. So
Yes.
yes, if you look at 72, he was still very new in government.
Yes.
77 was at the tail end of his administration.
Yes.
Yes, is there some bit of consistency in between, that maybe there was something different that we didn't look at then?
Of course, recklessness as well. Recklessness and arrogance. Because most autocratic regimes believe that there's nothing anybody can do, because they depend on force, military security services, and therefore for them to do those kinds of actions, they think that any discontent, whether it's internal or any force that is external, that is nothing they can do about them.
Honorable Ssemuju, let me come to you. Your own reflections. What are we reflecting on 46 years later?
First of all, I don't understand why the Archbishop, not the only victim, not the only high-profile victim, was isolated, and you don't have a day to remember Benedicto Kiwanuka. Ofono was listing many other high-profile people. I don't have a bit of information to know what the motivation for this particular day, for which we have earned ourselves a holiday, what the motivations were. We need to put context, and I'll come to the question you've asked. Idi Amin faced the rebellion, I think, from day one. I have spoken to Mzee Augustine Ruzindana, and he told me how they were organized in UNRF. They came and attacked the barracks in Mbarara. There were people operating like Zubairi Bakari in Kampala here, ferrying guns, sometimes Tanzania, sometimes to other areas in Uganda. But also we need to understand, and I'm not blaming the Archbishop, but I want to give context to this discussion. President Museveni, I think shortly after capturing power, he visited Prince Badiru Kakungulu, and General Muntu can correct me if I am wrong. I think they even invited him to go and speak to the Army Council in Entebbe. He visited the Kampala Archbishop Nsubuga, and he said they had helped him when he was fighting government. So the religious people are not entirely blameless when it comes to, it's not that they are not making a contribution. Let me not use that word. Maybe I will offend some people. They also make a contribution
To the
when they are
other side of the governance.
Yeah. And that will strip all the neutrality that they are supposed to enjoy. And you've seen how Museveni has attacked them, telling them to concentrate
on baptizing, eh?
Yeah. So I think for me that's the context, that Idi Amin faced a rebellion, and he behaved the way he did. Muntu says both internal and external. My own thinking was that remembering Luwum was going to, we're not going to remember just a victim, just one victim, but all the victims, and we make an undertaking as a country to stop. I remember when we went to, when we petitioned against the changing of the constitution to remove the age limit. In all our documents, the history and how it is captured in the constitution was a key factor. Because the preamble of the constitution, remembering our history. And this day to remember history is not just an occasion to go and please the Protestant church. I thought we were remembering the killings, the disappearances of people that happened under Amin. Of course, they continued even under Obote. But the same things are happening today.
We'll come to that in a moment. Let me first hear from...
So this day I will need, maybe the government people can help me to understand why it was important to have a public holiday to remember the Archbishop and not the Chief Justice and not the other high-profile people, or not to remember all of them collectively.
The Honorable Dr. Chris Baryomusi, he represents the people of Kanungu, of Chinchi's East constituency in Kanungu district, and also represents the people of Western Uganda on the NRM Central Executive Committee, SEC. He's also the Minister for Information and National Guidance and a very regular visitor on the NBS Frontline. Honorable Minister, you're welcome, but and a question. Why is today important? Why did government decide to give us a holiday to remember Archbishop Janan Luwum, and what lessons have we learned over the last 46 years?
Yes, thank you very much, and good evening, viewers, and good evening, my fellow panelists. Yeah, we are marking the day when the president of a country shot an archbishop, and an archbishop who was in charge of Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, and Boga Zaire. So actually regional archbishop. And the government took a decision, working with the church, the Anglican church, that we make this a public holiday and celebrate the life of Archbishop Janan Luwum. And it's very important because to remind all of us, particularly the younger generation, that Uganda has gone through different situations, including where people were just being killed anyhow, where human life was not respected, and you could know that you can die anytime in the hands of state agencies, including the president. Because when we speak to most of these young people who were born in the 80s, 90s, they would think that these are just stories because for you are already people, but you shouldn't raise these issues. So it is important as we reflect on what is happening today and reflect on what the future holds, to look back and see where we have come from and what was happening in Uganda then, and I mean, is basically like what also many other countries faced in the immediate post-colonial period. We know what happened in the DRC Congo, how the Prime Minister was just killed. In Togo, the President was killed immediately after independence. So the post-independence situation was not good for most countries in Africa, including Uganda here. Just to comment on what O.O. had raised earlier on, that why we do not remember the other ministers who were killed together with the Archbishop. We had a discussion in the cabinet, and we agreed that together with the Archbishop Janan Luwum, I think as we mark this day, we must also raise the profile of those ministers. And we also said this is a national event. We've been marking it in Kitugum, but maybe we can even rotate, because he was not the Archbishop for Northern Uganda alone, but an Archbishop for the whole country. So in the future, the day may be marked in different parts of the country. But the major lesson is that, yes, we need to appreciate where we have come from, that we at one point went so low to a level where people were just being murdered left and right. And our resolve as a country is that we should never go back to that kind of situation.
Let me come back to you.
I can assure you the NRM government is committed to seeing that we never go back to that kind of situation.
It's a question that keeps coming up, and very many people who are commenting today especially have been raising, and people speak in frame the discussion in such a way that they say, actually, what we thought had ended in the 1970s, pardon?
That we are back there.
Yes, that we're back there.
Yeah, let me first try to...
You must have seen the image of which has been making rounds of the man who appears to be burned on the breast.
Yes. Let me first go back and try to respond to Honorable Ssemuju, maybe by way of information or by way of educating him. There have been hundreds of thousands of people who have died under similar circumstances. There are those who died when Lubiri was attacked in 1966, and the Kabaka of Uganda fled through the small gate for taking out corpses, which would never happen. I don't know if you know that Sir Edward Mutesa fled through the behind gate, the rear gate of Lubiri, the gate which in the Buganda culture is used for taking dead bodies through. We don't have, as a country, a special day to commemorate that attack and the people who died subsequent to that. We don't have a special day to commemorate people who died on the 25th of January 1971 when Amin took over government, because there were people who died. As a result, we have had a number of days designated for celebrating contribution for people who have made Uganda what it is today. One of those days is the 26th of January, specifically tagged to the NRM liberation. We have the 6th of February. We have, yes, Tarehe Sita. We have Heroes Day.
On 9th June.
Of 9th June. I think Heroes Day tries to encompass all Ugandans who have made contribution. Some lost lives, some got injured. Heroes Day encompasses that. Does it capture everyone? Perhaps not. But because this discussion is going on, like Honorable Baryomusi has said, I had not heard that they had had this discussion. You can see that they are expanding. Even when we started Heroes Day, and this 26th January, and Tarehe Sita. Tarehe Sita, we used to celebrate it only at the barracks of NRA and UPDF. Now we rotate, because we think that day made a contribution for the whole country. 26th January, the same thing. Ben Kiwanuka, the judiciary in particular, have made special days to honor him with the Ben Kiwanuka memorial lectures. Mubiru, the governor, Bank of Uganda, who died in a similar, we have a memorial lecture for Mubiru, Joseph Mubiru. So there are a number of days, but for this particular one, I think there was big push by the Church of Uganda, by the Anglican community of the world, that we give Luwum, because they had given him a sainthood, and therefore that's why Luwum is recognized especially as an individual. Which
actually a sainthood, which is a rarity within the Anglican Church.
Yeah, but that was not done by the government of Uganda, but it was done by the church, the Anglican Church community. And so we need to appreciate it in that way. Now, if we want to recognize the other people, Honorable Ssemuju is now a member of parliament. You can bring a motion, a bill, and say, why don't we consolidate these days to recognize the following categories of people? I don't think the government or parliament would have an issue with that. And whether we want to make it a national public holiday or just a national day like Tarehe Sita, that can also be agreed upon. Now, you are asking why are people making comparison? Of course, for those of us who are in the NRM today, it pains that there should even be a comparison between this government and the previous, either about 2 or either. I mean, it's even worse when you're compared to but there is a difference. As you can see from the few names I gave, and you can go and read the books, history books, Amin went for high profile and small people, and it was a state policy, as you have heard from Baryomusi, from the president. If you listen to all the major address of Amin, you clearly see that summary execution on suspicion was a state policy. Today we are having things that may be similar, though isolated and extremely few in number, which shouldn't happen, but is not, the difference is it is not state policy. Yes, it may be done by state officials, but not an official policy that there should be summary execution, there should be torture, and so on. The other difference is when it happens, first of all, it is easy to know who has done it. And where the government, where the culprit has been identified, the government owns up, makes good, punishes. Give me one case of Idi Amin, the date of Kiwanuka, the date of Ochola, the date of there was, by the way, somebody, Okware, the one of prisons in Tororo, Francis Warugembe, the mayor of Masaka and so on.
That was Karimuzo, the vice
Karimuzo, the one. Give me one case where the investigation was done and not concluded, or investigation was concluded and culprits found and punished, or they were not punished because they fled the country and they were beyond the reach of the state. So there is a marked difference. Yes, some elements. It depends when the kind of pictures you show. I have seen the spokesperson of the army, my brother Kureje, saying it is not the army. So we would want...
Although I have been told that that tweet has since been removed.
We would want to know if it is not the army. If it is just rogues, business rivalry, and so on, are we at that point as NRM government where there are rogues in the country who can kidnap, torture, and dump, and then the government of Uganda does not have reach to those kind of people? Obviously, it would be a low point for the NRM.
Who do you want to answer that question from the members on the panel here, apart from you and the minister?
Yes, I am saying...
Who would answer if the government doesn't?
No, I'm not. I'm putting a rhetorical question, and I'm saying we have not yet reached that level. Yes, we cannot prevent people from making comparison, but generally, I think we have moved miles and miles away from the situation of Idi Amin, or even the situation of the NRM of 1986 and 90. We have even moved away from, for example, under that Amin of 77, there were only 3 religious denominations allowed in Uganda officially: the Catholic Church, the Church of Uganda, and the Islamic faith. These people, all these Pentecostal, the Baha'i, all of those had been banned. Secondly, there was no political dissent of any type. Today you can say, Ssemuju will say his rally may be disrupted, he's asked to ask for permission from police, or perhaps he's asked to inform the police, but the police thinks he should ask for permission, and therefore they interfere with his freedom of assembly and talking to people and so on. Today, the political rights, personal rights, individual rights, group rights, association, and I mean, you see that Makerere University, I think I don't think my brother Janan was there, but I think those were the years they were entering there because they followed them. You see that thing you call guild, government, had been banned. Yeah, now in Makerere, in all the universities of Uganda, student governments are the in thing, professional associations are the in thing, and so on.
There's been a lot of debate on that. The
lesson we should learn today, that actually the NRM people should be able to look into themselves and say, really, when anybody, whether fairly or unfairly, twice is beginning to compare the NRM to Amin, or comparing Amin's government, or comparing President Yoweri Museveni to Milton Obote or to Amin, that should give us actually resolve as NRM people
Muntu,
to do much better.
The comparisons,
yes,
the comparisons are with us, and people asking what lessons have been learned over the years. What has changed? I'd like to bring it to you. I'm reading a biographical sketch written by somebody called, it's a fairly long one, so I will not read into it, James E. Keifer, but he begins retracing Uganda's, the killings of religious people from as early as the time the church entered this region in 1877, and he goes to the 1877 for the Anglican faith and 1879 for the Catholic Church, and then looks to the killings of Bishop Hannington and then the others that followed. It's a fairly long one, but he wrote it, he says it's, titled Janan Luwum, Archbishop of Uganda, murdered 16 February 1977, an extract for personal family use. Jeno, the comparisons. Obviously, OO is uncomfortable with the comparisons. Yes, you said it doesn't feel good for you as NRM that the comparisons are being made, but from where you sit?
I think the similarities are in the intentions. The moment any regime decides to hang on to power at any cost, and more so when it's around an individual, as day follows night, they all start doing the same things. The only difference is the levels of the intensity. And unless there is sanity that prevails within that kind of setting, and the reforms are conducted. When reforms are not, any regime will reach the extremes until there is an implosion or it is overrun by external forces. So the question now, like where the moment we lifted the term limits, you could see that the dynamics that used to be within the ruling, at that time it was a movement, they weren't even parties. Space continued getting narrower and narrower, and you could see the culture of fear getting more and more intense. Because all governments make mistakes. I'm not so sure that there is any government which can be 100% perfect. However, the difference is when you find there is an internal environment within which intense debates can be conducted on any subject under the sun, when there's that kind of environment, they know that corrective actions will always be taken. But when that internal environment is infiltrated by fear, more so because of those who will want to manipulate the population, manipulate the actors, a regime will continue degenerating. I mean, you can see it across the African continent, you see it in Asia, you see it in Europe. So of course it's unfortunate, even if I'm not a member of the government or the movement ever since it became a party, but someone who is linked to the struggle between 81 and 86, you know, at times you look at the comparisons between, you know, that struggle and now its culmination where it has reached. And then there are comparisons with the Amin regime and the Obote II regime. And then, in a sense, my hope is that it can really activate those who are still in the movement. Hopefully, they can take a stand and say, no, this can't happen. This is not the way this is not the way we want to end.
Would you say it's being exaggerated? Is the government being accused unfairly? What would you say?
You know, where we are at, if those who are within government and within the regime don't take a stand and carry out corrective actions, we are on a very slippery path. Let me use 2 examples. Security is not an area where people should play around, in as far as I'm concerned. The stability of a country is hinged on the stability within the security services. And the strength of institutions that are the bedrock of stability in a country, you'll see where they have got laws which are followed, irregardless of who is what. This recent 2-year experience where you find a general in uniform literally doing campaigns, and the parliament is mute. Actually, it's playing dead. I keep using that. The Minister of Defense can't give a statement. Shows you the weakness within the whole governance apparatus. That's one. Two, the abductions which are taking place. One would have expected that when the situation keeps growing as it is in terms of attention which has been drawn to it, that internally within the regime, that there would be pressures to say, we have crossed the line, corrective actions need to be taken. What I read instead is there seems to be a group, when you look at social media, you can see that it is I think a faction within the government structures, but that there is nobody who is able to bring them to order. I think is where there is a problem. Because you can see a faction which is trying to cut out a cover-up, and they are doing it in such an inept way. I mean, you just can't. I saw, like, example, who are trying to send information on social media saying that NUP is paying the people who are being tortured, giving them money so that they can undergo the pain, and then they expose them to the public, media, and the international community as they are discrediting the regime. But you can see whoever is trying to run that propaganda did not factor in the issue that almost all these people who end up being shown in the public media would have been abducted. Most of them would have been abducted by numberless vehicles. So you ask yourself, would you expect NUP to arrest these people, abduct them, using numberless vehicles, a number of them, over a period of time, and they are not, arrested in the process? Because if you are going to abduct 10, 20 people over a period of a year, 2 years, and at no point has any such operation ever been curtailed by the security services, you just find that that's something so far-fetched. In any case, some of them who've been abducted, and then eventually when there is pressure, then they end up in a court somewhere, or in a police station. So you can even see that whoever is trying to do a cover-up is doing it in such an inept way, or maybe, it's panic, I don't know what it is. Anyway, there is a problem. And my hope is that there's going to be effort, and that effort will be effective, whether within the regime or wherever it comes from. This is not the direction we need to go as a country. That's why we need to learn lessons from the past, Because when you have this kind of situation where nobody is brought to book, then everybody becomes vulnerable.
Archbishop Janan Luwum's situation escalated because of that pastoralator that they wrote, and he offered to take lead on as a prelate. Do you see that kind of thing happening today? Can the religious community, the leadership of the religious community, Anglican, Catholic, and the others, coming together and releasing a stinging pastoralator, talking about these abductions, talking about this torture, and that being taken lying down?
I really hope that the Interreligious Council will be bold enough to take a stand at some point, and whether openly or privately, firmly meet with the president or any other leaders within the regime and try to wake them up.
But in general,
my hope, I don't know, because when we interact, at times we hear that they have engagements. I don't know what goes on in those engagements. That some of these actions are still taking place means that the engagements are not yet effective. So they must keep pushing Because if they don't keep pushing and the regime wakes up, then the road we are walking is very slippery. And our past, 60 years, I can't understand how we cannot learn from our history of 60 years. I just simply can't understand.
61 this year, actually.
You know?
You're itching to say something, so I'll give you 30 seconds and then I'll come to Ssemuju.
My brother, General Muntu, I hope you listen to the Christmas preachings. The Catholic Church, the Anglican, the Islamic faith, and actually over the last 10 years, they might not have come together to write a pastoral letter, because I remember, I think when we had the Archbishop Bachenga, I seem to recall that was the last pastoral letter, at least from the Catholic Church, and I think at one time Archbishop Odama. But if you have been following the religious leaders on those important days, Easter, Christmas, New Year, their messages have been pointed towards governance issues. Now, maybe the question we can ask, has the leadership of the NRM government been listening? I want to answer in the affirmative, that indeed we have been listening, and that is precisely the reason why I said earlier on, yes, today mistakes are taking place, but not as we were 1986, 1995. We are miles better than what we were 1989.
Honorable Ssemuju, yes. What is that journey we have moved? Because you're going to that and then I cut you off in your earlier submission. When these comparisons are made, the question is, like I put to both Janan Muntu and OO, are these exaggerations, are critics being unfair to the government? And is government listening? Because that's what OO has been asking. Is government actually listening? Is the regime listening?
I have said before, let me repeat, that if Mr. Museveni faced a similar situation like Idi Amin faced and Obote, maybe more than 3 million people would be dead. And if you want to know that, just go to the areas where he has either developed a conflict, a disagreement, or where he has suspected people. Go to Kasese. There is nobody who was tried in Kasese, including children. They were killed. And up to now, the king is still under some sort of house arrest. In Uganda here, remember the incident of Kayonga. More than 60 people were killed. Killed the same way people who were protesting the arrest of Honorable Robert Kyagulanyi, November 2020, were killed. They were just shooting at everybody, people in taxis, people in arcades. Go to where Museveni has executed war. Teso, Acholi, and I don't know why Ofono will feel bad that he's being compared. The NRA was operating in Kampala. In Namugongo, they were occupying the forest originally owned by Kano Chibirige. They were operating in Namugongo. I read Major General Charles Gonza's book. He said his duty was to make sure that people go to sleep at 3 in Kampala. They were here in Kampala shooting people, carrying out terrorism.
Before taking over government? Before taking over government.
But look at the way they have handled suspect. I told the television station this morning, when I was arrested in 2010 for walk to work, I was charged with being a public nuisance, but I was handcuffed. And then you tell someone, and some of their communicators are not intelligent, not even half intelligent, that you have arrested ADF suspects, collected them from all over Kampala, and they are not handcuffed, and then you take them to Namuongo, and the following day you claim that we shot them when they were running away. And Ssemuju was charged with being a public nuisance, he's on handcuff, but the ADF are not. They were running away when they were killing Sheikh Chirev, who was removed from his house at night. They said he was there. I said, maybe we no longer have soldiers and policemen. 20 people, and you can't run after a suspect, one like this. And the solution consistent, you've seen one they killed in Luwum last week. They said we wanted a lot of information from him, but unfortunately he was running. They are trying to be smarter, but I don't see a difference. I have said it before, the difference is in the level of education. But stretched the same way, they behave worse than, security people.
I'll give you more time because we need to take a quick break. Let me take a message from Leandro Komakech, who says, Comrade Charles, Remembrance Day is part of the package under reparation, amnesty, accountability, and truth-telling, and traditional justice. It's a transitional justice bill with the Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs. Therefore, the country will sit down and reflect on itself and design how it will reconcile its past for a better future. That's Honorable Leandro Komakech. Thank you for sending the message. I also take a message from Sarah Bireta, who says, I wish to thank General Muntu for the great submissions. He has explained the current degenerating context better, but rather in a more diplomatic manner. And he says, my question is, the priority of any government worth its name is the protection of its citizens and the sovereign. The denial and ping-pong about kidnaps and torture of citizens demonstrates the failing command and control function in UPDF and the failure of the responsibility to protect by President Museveni's government. Where does this leave the legitimacy of the regime? We'll take a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we'll pick up this conversation.
Frontline.
Words can only get you so far. My tasting notes for Black Label are as follows. But if you prefer words, I'd say sweet toffee, rich fruit, venison smoke.
Work, work, work. Work's over. Busy Biter, get down to snack business. When snacking is under attack, we'll be there to fight back.
Confused about a specific law? The bridge between you and your government is your MP. It is their responsibility, therefore, to explain to you the laws that have been passed by Parliament and what they mean. Your constituent member of Parliament represents your views in Parliament regardless of party affiliation. Make your voice heard. Talk to your MP. This message is brought to you by the Parliament of the Republic of Uganda.
You will always know when you're in the presence of the finest. It's like time slows down, just enough for you to feel everything in full flavor.
Tusker Malt Lager, now in a distinctive new look.
I used to get worried every time I had to paint my walls. I'd be afraid of anyone touching my walls, and I had to paint every month. But ever since I discovered Sino Paint, my worries are a thing of the past. It's long-lasting, durable, fade-resistant, and its looks. Wow. It makes me proud of my walls.
Get yourself vinyl silk, vinyl matte, budget undercoat, weatherhold, plaster primer, and so much more from Sino Paint to give your walls the look it needs. Sino Paint, new vision, new life.
Today is a good day to draw up a new play. So start something. Make your move and get in your groove. Do it for the gram. Do it for the culture. Be loud. Be extra. Be a thinker. A life eater. A Tusker light drinker. Start something. Turn on your lights. Tusker lights.
Enjoy longer-lasting freshness with the new king-size Movet Family Soap, available in 4 exciting flavors, and experience the rich texture of coconut, the natural herbal scent of aloe vera, the tingly sensation of lemon, and the silky smooth feel of rose. Get a fresh start for your family with the new king-size Movet Family Soap, available in all shops and supermarkets near you. Movet, all-day confidence.
Let me just send.
Yes.
Oh.
Accessing your contacts the old way.
Yeah.
Accessing your contacts with the My Airtel app. You have the power in your pocket. The power to access your favorite contacts right through the app. Unlock that power with the My Airtel app. Visit the App Store or Google Play now.
You're still watching NBS Frontline, and we're discussing the commemoration of the Archbishop Janan Luwum Day. Archbishop Janan Luwum was the Archbishop of the province of the Church of Uganda, but was murdered in 1977. Professor David Bachivinga is watching us and says on Twitter, on the query about singling out Luwum for recognition, it is felt that Uganda played catch-up to the Church of England, which recognized the deceased as a saint and mounted a statue at Westminster Cathedral. Thank you, Professor, for watching and for the feedback. I'll take a couple of more messages before I come back to you, Honorable Ssemuju, and then I'll go to the Minister. Dr. Grace Lubale is watching and says, OO explains well why Archbishop Janan was recognized more than others who were murdered. The human rights situation in Uganda is deteriorating badly, particularly as a result of changes in the constitution aimed at keeping the current regime in power. Way forward is to resurrect the 2-term limit and 75 age limit of presidency. Another viewer here says, who's this? Joshua Kenshunju from Umsita says, indeed, the most natural relation between religion and politics is one, which the most important political question have religious answers. The legitimacy of particular authority, we thank this regime that the political questions have political answers, not religious. He calls himself Sir Joshua. I think this is a gentleman from Kazo. I think so. Let me just take maybe 1 or 2 more messages. This is a message from Hare Sagara, who says, I am watching my old friend Ofono Pondo saying that the killings during Amin regime were official state policy. Please ask him for me, when does the government he speaks for intend to make the current spate of abductions and killings official state policy? I think it's long overdue. They can use their numbers in parliament to make it a law. That's from Hare Sagara. And Hare or will respond to you. He'll have occasion to respond to you. Another viewer here, I don't know who this is, says, I think the former governments were protecting themselves from being overthrown by the goons, as the saying of today's government is, killing those ones who are trying to show them that we are back to the old days. I need to find the name. Yes, this is a message from Sally Isaac. Another person here says, it's grossly unfortunate that OO is making a comparison of them, the NRM, and Idi Amin's government, which they say was a government of illiterate people. For me, there is basically no major difference between the two in as far as gross violations of human rights is concerned. One thing that separates the two is that Amin liked doing the inhumane things himself, as opposed to someone today who does the same through agents. When OO talked about the attack on Lubiri, he reminded me when Omusinga's palace in Kasese was attacked in 2016 under the command of Elwelu, where a number of people were murdered while others were arrested, and to date, they have never been served with justice nor sentenced. This is a message. I need to find the author of this message. I'll find, yes, this is gift from Nansana. Let me see, one more here. This is, he calls himself Katabs, watching from Nigeria. It's frightening to listen to Honorable Chris Baryomusi because he's like the French Bourbons, who learned nothing and forgot nothing. It's sad that we have failed to learn from our history. I agree with Honorable Ssemuju that this regime would be more lethal if it faced insurgencies Amin and Obote encountered. Conclude your thought, and then because someone is talking about
I was just developing
Dr. Baryomusi, I need to go to him. Please, go ahead.
So the point that I make, you go and arrest young men that they are putting on beret, and you torture them. If you are the one who faced the General Muntus, young men holding guns in Ruwero, let me tell you, first, the same or similar situation like Amin and Obote did, Museveni would be worse than Obote and Amin. I have no doubt about that. So? I mean, see the treatment. That they have beret, they are arrested by military, they are in a court martial, you get flat iron to iron them, to iron their chest. See Kakwenza, how he left the country. And these are not armed people. All that they have is beret. And
would the regime would the government be unfair to say, well, Kakwenza might have come out of wherever he was the way he did, but he was able to leave the country in one piece?
Yeah, but others didn't. I don't think people who were killed in the Kasese ever left the Kasese. So there are examples of killing similar to the killing that happened. One of the victims we are celebrating.
What about the issue that in Kasese there was actually a growing rebellion emerging and coordinated through the palace?
But when you go and surround and people are surrendering, I have colleagues, members of parliament who were inside, the Honorable Atkins. They kept speaking to General Katumba Wamala, and he assured them that please all of you just collect at the main gate, things are going to be okay. Only for the main gate to be blasted and shooting starts. It is the reason they were arresting journalists, including a lady who works, I think, with KNT in Kenya. They didn't want to be filmed. They simply went to mow down everybody, and it was achieved. So really, you are stretching my point. So the point I make is that first, similar and same situation, Mr. Museveni would be worse than Idi Amin, because just political, see his response to political contestation. You go to Arua where there is a campaign and the driver of Kyagulanyi is killed. And the only instance where I've seen them act, and of course also acting extrajudicially, was when they tried soldiers in Karamoja for killing a priest. There the action was instant.
Declan Otule.
The action was instant. I think he presided over by Colonel Sura Semakula, who should have served better in Idi Amin's soldiers, is now dead. And then the following day, the soldiers were executed. Recently, the president said those who were killed in Kampala in November are going to be compensated, admitting responsibility that actually most of the people killed did not commit any crime. They were not even suspected, but they were killed. When you put this in the context of today's public holiday, commemorating. In fact, where you're going, it's going to be worse. I was just telling you during the break.
Let's just step back a little.
Yeah.
You say faced with a similar situation, Museveni and his government would be worse.
Yeah.
But this government has faced a rebellion in northern Uganda the last
you know what they
20
did?
years.
You know what they did
with the
there?
LRA, faced a total of 29 rebellions, armed rebellions. So they faced it all, wouldn't you say?
But the
where there has been
that is here, it could help us
where there has been a rebellion.
If he did what Ssemuju is saying they did.
Ofono. Yes, General Muntu was a commander of the military. When Tinyefuza was in the north, the things he did, I don't think they are different from what Idi Amin would have done.
When you were young, I can tell you that both of them were there.
It does not matter, even if General Muntu was there, it doesn't make it good, or it doesn't make it okay. You can explain he's here.
So please.
Go and listen to Daniel Omaratubo, who was a minister. When people were being transported from Peche Stadium to Kampala, you die, they throw you in the forest and continue. People who had been crammed in Peche Stadium by Tinyefuza. Let me tell you, you're asking me that they have faced a rebellion. What they did in northern Uganda, now they are in power. Wait when they have gone, and we are now remembering people who were killed by Museveni and during Museveni's time. You will hear those stories. They are not different from Idi Amin's stories.
Dr. Baryomusi, let me come to you. You're a very senior leader within the government and the political party. This discussion, like Ofono said, is uncomfortable, that it's happening about this government and that it is happening in reflection of history 47 years ago, in a year when we mark 61 years since we became independent, and we've been trying to run away the context of the 1995 Constitution and the preamble to that Constitution, that is happening now. Why are we having this kind of conversation? And you sit in those high levels of the discussions, both in cabinet, in the Central Executive Committee. Why is this happening? Why is it not happening in those spaces, not here?
No, General Muntu and his colleagues went to the bush to establish a new order where Ugandans are free to discuss anything. And we don't necessarily feel offended that people make these public commentaries. So under NRM, you can discuss anything, whether significant or trivial, there is no problem with it. But it's important that we know where we have come from. For instance, I hear people say, oh, Museveni is a dictator, we are under dictatorship. And at times I ask, do you know what the dictatorship means? If you look at what African countries went through after independence, like I said earlier on, the relationship between the state and religious institutions. I come from Kanungu, which neighbors DRC. Do you know, for instance, in 1972, President Mobutu banned baptism, and it was a crime to get a Christian name. That's when even he changed his own name. And everybody had to drop a Christian name, and if you were a priest and you baptize a child, they arrest you. In Central Africa, there was Emperor Bokassa. A story is told of how the government gave a tender to his wife, the first lady, to make uniforms for all school children in the country. And when the president was driving in Bangui, in the streets, he saw school children putting on a uniform which hadn't been made by his wife. And he ordered the soldiers to shoot them, and they were shot on the street. So I am saying...
This story is verifiable, Honorable Minister.
That a president is driving and is able to identify that this child is not putting on a uniform made by my wife.
Yes. You go and read, these things are written. Things are written. So I am saying countries post-independence went through those difficult times. I think it's unfair, really, to say, like O.O. said, it is discomforting, yes, to start comparing NRM and those regimes, but it's also unfair of Honorable Ssemuju to say, face the same challenges, President Museveni will be worse than Idi Amin. Restoration of protection of rights of Ugandans. has basically been championed by the NRM government. Some of us were fairly old, you know, 42, even Idi Amin regime, we saw what was going on. Really, you cannot say, if you are genuine, that under the NRM government, that you should compare with what was happening under Idi Amin
Muntu
regime.
asked something which I think is important. He says, he asked a question and said, how can you say, I mean, how can we as a country be looking at a situation where people get arrested, or the use of the word that is being used commonly now, abducted by numberless vehicles, some in broad daylight, some in the depth of the night, and they disappear. And no state authority is able to come out and say, wait a minute, who picked up these people? I know, actually, from Janan Muntu's words, to blame a political party called NUP and say, these are things being done by NUP, to blame government. And it runs for some time, and there is no investigation or prosecution of people who are perpetrating that to soil the name of the government.
I think there is a sense of hyperbole in this debate of torture and abductions. You are even like not comfortable saying abductions because we all live in Uganda. And we've discussed this topic. Just call the chairperson of the Human Rights Committee of Parliament, Honorable Fox Odoi, how our colleagues brought the so-called tortured people and picked people who had got road traffic accidents, borders who had got accidents, and paraded them in the committee that these people have been tortured.
Even the Makere boy who threw back a gas canister at the police. A tear gas canister, and it chopped off his hand. He was also presented.
They presented in Parliament and these has been tortured. So, while there could be some isolated cases where our security officers misbehave, but you cannot say that is the dominant theme, that people are being abducted or tortured or killed as a matter of state policy. No. We have said for the umpteenth time that when a security officer, a police officer, breaches the law and handles wrongly a suspect, there are internal mechanisms within police or security agencies to discipline those officers. But it is never a policy of the state to torture anybody. And there is a sense of exaggeration when you talk of these so-called abductions. How come the people who are very vocal against the government, like Honorable Ssemuju, are not abducted?
You mean they abducted everybody?
How weighty?
Then there will be no soul in Uganda.
No. How weighty are those people who you've been presenting in the parliament that they are abducted and so forth and so forth? And we have said time and again that the state...
Chris grew up...
The state...
He was there during, were you abducted? Government don't abduct everybody, but they abduct some people.
Who?
Governments.
So how...
That's why Idi Amin never abducted you.
He didn't know where I was. I was not rich when I was young. Anyway, what I'm saying is that the government is able to account for whoever is in the hands of the state. Yes. I don't think you can correctly say that today the government agents come and take someone and shoot him. At least you can say people are being arrested. The other day, one of the panelists was saying, oh, these people are being abducted and then taken to the police post for records and then taken. And you call that an abduction. Somebody is arrested by officials, he's taken to the police post, there is a record, and then again you say that's an abduction. We have said that the arrests take place. And when you are arrested, you are taken to a police post or police station, and the people are arraigned in the court, and they are taken to prison, they are remanded. The other day, the leader of opposition was complaining, why are these prisoners, he called them political prisoners, in Ruzira and Chitaria? At least he didn't say, why have they been shot in cold blood without being tried and so forth and so forth. So
a panelist on the show, the Honorable Winnie Kiza, is the one I think was talking about the arrest of that old man from Kasese, Mzee Muhonja, I think she said, Mzee Muhonja, but he died. And
yes, unfortunately, he died.
I have seen the statement from the police explaining the circumstance of his death. I don't know if anybody is being held accountable for that, for the situation.
I have to check, but she was raising a flimsy argument that he's 75 years. How can you arrest a 75-year-old person? But what if the person is suspected of committing a crime? Is there an age limit with respect to crime in Uganda? The answer is no.
Because today, you really cannot arrest Museveni and say he was involved in rebellion.
No, President
his age, he cannot. But when he was 30-something, he was in Ruwero.
No, that's a petty argument. President Museveni is the president.
There are things he cannot.
So you are saying he can't be arrested because of his age?
There are things he cannot do today. That's the point I make.
Can't he coordinate? Can't he coordinate? Can't he
Are you saying the laws you pass in Parliament, is there a law which says a 90-year-old, if he defiles, for example, cannot be arrested? Is there such a law you are passing in Parliament?
If someone can't walk because on account of his age, then you can't say he was in Guru recruiting rebels. That's the point I make.
Crimes are of different.
At that point, we can't.
At that point,
when
we were still in high school, like a disco, a very weak argument that you are just raising. Even an 100-year-old person can commit a crime, and he is not immune to the law.
To answering for
those crimes. So that's a flimsy argument.
Okay, let me take a message from
to the real argument of that person dying in the hands of the state.
No, it depends. That should be investigated, because you can die of natural causes in prison or in the police cells. But if he was tortured or handled wrongly, then the responsible officers should be brought to book. Because
I need to bring in.
We don't condone torture or inhuman treatment of suspects.
I need to bring in Janan Muntu into the discussion. But Patrick Muganzi is watching us from Fort Portal and says, listening carefully to the panelists, they seem to all agree that there's ongoing killings, torture, ill treatment in detention. Such patterns of violence need to be addressed for the betterment of the future for this country. Yes, Janan, you wanted to say something.
I think, again, we need to look at intentions. Because there could be times when maybe people are involved in plots set to overthrow a government. And then because of the ineptness of the investigative agencies, they may commit a lot of errors in the process of arresting, in the process of investigations, and the process of prosecutions. There you could see that it's the ineptness of the services, and therefore in that regard you could put focus and resources in training. If the intention is to curb in a group which is planning to overthrow a government. But there are also times when the intentions are completely different, and that's the way I read this current situation. The current situation from my reading is to conduct operations to create fear.
But where are those operations?
For example, the example of Kasese, which people keep raising. When you find that you are in a situation where you have control over a situation, like the military had, full, total control over the situation in Kasese. The palace was completely surrounded. There was absolutely no way they would expect any reinforcements to the forces which were inside the palace. If there were any who were planning to fight, they wouldn't get any reinforcements. So it would have been possible even to decide and siege that place for whatever period it took for them to surrender or to cut off any supplies until they would reach a point where they would have no alternative other than to surrender. There was total control. Look, just a second. When we were fighting in the West, there was a siege on Masaka. There was a siege on Mbarara. Those sieges took, I think, close to 1.5 or 2 months. These were armed.
That's the period between 1981,
Cut off Katonga,
yes, 81 to
and
85.
sieged Masaka, sieged Mbarara. Yeah, these were full battalions, heavily armed. But they could not be resupplied.
And this siege were by you?
Yes, yes.
By
NRA.
By
yes,
NRA,
yes. Cut off all areas where the UNRA or the government at that time could have reinforced them or sent them supplies. Until they ran out of supplies completely. They surrendered. Now, it is completely incomparable to the group which was within that palace. They didn't have machine guns, they didn't have rocket-propelled grenades, they didn't have artillery, they didn't have anything. If they had, they must have had small weapons. That anybody determined to use the force they did to overrun that was deliberate, simply to create fear. That's one. Two, these kind of operations which have been happening, you know, initially they were using numberless vehicles. Do you ask yourself, in a situation like we're in now, why on earth would any security services use numberless vehicles to arrest? These police, they can go with the police vehicles and arrest day or night. They have the capability. Because all these people they are arresting, and that they're even armed. If they're armed, they just have maybe AK-47, if they are people involved in terrorism. So that is done even using numberless vehicles is also a tool for causing fear. You can see a pattern in all these things which are happening. So those who are in positions of responsibility, if the whole government is in it, then there's nothing we can do about it. If the whole government is not in it, then it should ask itself, why should this happen? And then we would be able to understand, you know. But my own reading of the situation again is that the narrower the support base of a regime becomes, the more the regime finds it necessary to intensify fear within the public. And if the public refuses to be fearful and becomes more and more bold, two things might happen. One, the regime can intensify the actions that they carry out to crush that spirit of people who are resisting. Or there might be people who are bold within the regime who will stand their ground and say, enough is enough. We cannot continue in that direction. I don't know which is going to happen of the two.
What's your reading?
I don't know. Yes, we just keep watching.
Yes, or?
First of all, I want to respectfully disagree with my brother, Janan Muntu. Between 1986 and 2000, we did not have term limit removed. Actually, between 1986, the Janan Muntu had given us interim only 4 years.
Yeah.
How come? That was also the season we saw widespread abuse by the nascent government of the NRM. Janan Muntu and I who have been there before, and I've said this on this show. There was a time when we arrested people who we said were fomenting rebellion, especially in eastern Uganda. And we brought them and we said they are lodgers.
Yeah.
We never took them to court. Once we broke the backbone of the rebellion, we released them. Janan Muntu was among the leadership.
Yep.
I was down the rank.
And I'll give you the explanation why.
Now, General Muntu seems to be saying that if people are confined like in Kasese, in Mumbere's palace, supposedly they don't have sufficient arms to cause havoc. And so the ones who are in open ground, open air ground, those ones you can shoot. I don't agree with him.
Is that what he's saying?
No.
Yes.
No. That's how I understood him. Because he's saying,
okay, he's here.
Because there have been instances where we have applied maximum force in open air ground, like in Teso, in northern Uganda and other parts, and we applied maximum force according to him, which was not commensurate in his judgment in Kasese, and I disagree with him on that. Secondly,
but I hope you remember the context of the comments and what we're discussing on the show.
I'm talking about
the commemoration of Janan Luwum and the circumstances of his.
That's his interpretation.
Yes, my understanding of his
give a response.
Sure. And I'm saying why, of course, the Ssemujus and now, of course, my brother Muntu, they are free to use a thick brush to paint, so that even someone who's from far can see the paint. That's okay. According to what Honorable Baryomusi said, evidence will eventually emerge which will bear this government out as not comparable to Idi Amin. Why? We have, as a government, over the years, reformed the laws. Reforming the laws is helping us to reach the levels of transparent accountability. We now know if you arrest somebody or if you suspect somebody, this is how you're supposed to treat the person. And therefore, we have a benchmark against which to tick whether we are improving or not. The laws are there. And I mean, I doubt if we had laws, the kind of laws that we have today. Secondly, we have created institutions.
What do you say to the argument?
We have created institutions.
Just a minute. On the point you're raising.
Accountability mechanisms.
Yes, on the point you're raising, which I think is a good point. How do you respond to people who say the good laws were written on which to benchmark?
Yes.
But the book on those laws seems to have been closed and put on the side.
I don't agree. I don't agree with them.
Okay.
During Amin, totally, we did not have a parliament to which anybody could run. You did not have a judiciary where to go and say, I am looking for habeas corpus, for example. Or my person was arrested, he has spent long in detention. Today you have that. You can say they may not be delivering the justice at a faster pace as you expect, or as the rules, as the laws say. But you cannot say that we don't have laws. You cannot say we don't have institutions. You can now question, do those institutions give us proper accountability? Now, I want to disagree with the, did you say Ibale, Dr. Ibale, who sent you some message there?
Many people have sent some messages.
Yeah, I know, but you refer to Dr. Ibale.
Dr. Luvale.
Luvale?
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Luvale. Again, they are free to use a thick brush. But the accountability mechanism are available, not one, not two, not three, many. You have the Parliament of Uganda, you have the court system of Uganda, you have the administrative infrastructure of Uganda, you have...
Of the different security agencies.
Yes. Within the security agencies, within the government, you have accountability mechanism that people who do things with impunity, it won't take long for them to be found, to be held liable and accountable. You have non-state actors. I don't know whether this time is correct. Today, you have civil society organizations that can take on the state infrastructure and demand accountability. You do not have any of these under Idi Amin. And that's why I'm saying, yes, we can, those who want to compare can compare the NRM Museveni regime to that of Amin, and they can even say this one is worse. But facts are available. Of course, I don't expect Ssemuju, Honorable Ssemuju, to say otherwise, because he's using the thick brush. What is it meant to do? is meant to persuade the Ugandan that Museveni and NRM are no gooder. Should there be an opportunity, give us.
Throw them out.
Luckily, what Ssemuju and what General Muntu is saying today is what Cecilia Ogwal said in 1996. You remember, Honorable Aguro, may his soul rest in eternal peace, took up arms because he said the Muntus were no good in 1986, 89. I want to believe that Cecilia Ogwal today, her standpoint could be markedly different from the one of General Muntu and my other brother, Kano Besigye, insofar as what NRM provides today. Okay. I'm sure I'm sure Madam Cecilia Ogwal will say the Parliament of Uganda today is better than the NRC in accountability, is in representing Ugandans, than the NRC of 1986 to 96.
Honorable Minister, hold it for a moment. Let General Muntu respond, but I will also pick a message from the Honorable Francis Muzicha, who says, watching Ofono Pondo struggling to defend the attack on the Obusinga Palace and the various killings by the regime in the country confirms that the country has gone to the dogs. That's Francis Muizuchi. Laban Mohawe is watching us and says, when you are suspected and detected in accordance with Article 212 of the Uganda Constitution, you are arrested as a suspect and investigated accordingly. Ndugu General Muntu, you were my director military intelligence, and we used to arrest them and interrogate them. Do you remember the Kayiras? So, functions of police is to detect, investigate, and prevent crime. Uganda Constitution, Article 212. Please respond to him as you respond to Ofono Pondo, and then I'll go to the Minister.
The conduct of counter-insurgency operations are some of the most complex. But basic principally, there are also two approaches. And a number of times you'll find a dominant approach. At times you'll find their dual approach. In our operations of 86, 87, and larger through the 90s, those were some of the most complex operations that we were confronted with. And if there was one to do research in different parts of the country, depending on who was commanding where, you would clearly detect which approach was being used. The principal approaches are counterinsurgency operations that are driven by the winning of hearts and minds. There's another approach which is called scorched earth. You use force and you subdue the enemy until you suppress whatever will they had to fight. Now, when you look at the differences in the different parts of the country, I don't want to go into names of commanders, you can clearly see that there was a difference in approach.
There's a hierarchy, there's a command structure within the military.
Yeah, there's a command.
And that is where the meeting point of the tendencies or the approaches would be found.
It's always a struggle within a struggle.
Yes.
Don't think that there can be perfection.
Yes.
And that's why you'll find that there are areas where the commanders who are using the winning of hearts and minds approaches, the relationship between the units and the civilian population was far much better than those who chose to use a different approach.
But your neighbors
that's one aspect.
Yes, your neighbors on both sides have referred to the period when you're in command, when you're in charge.
Yes.
And especially in regards to the rebellion in northern Uganda.
Yes.
What was the dominant approach there?
That's what I'm telling you. If you are to use, well, the ones in government, they should maybe, or maybe those who do research outside, they can go and do research down there. Now it's already history. The war is no longer there. They can go and find out from which areas, which commander was using which method. It's clear in our internal, we knew. The other aspect is the one where we literally arrested thousands and thousands of civilians and put them in a reserve. I think they were between 10,000 to 15,000. because we had detected through the intelligence services that we were facing a problem. One, when the army was carrying out operations, they would go through an area and they would, be ambushed. And some of the commanders were losing patience in terms of the people whom they would arrest. They would send them the rear for them to be screened to detect who could have been an armed insurgent and who could have been a civilian. Of course, there was a problem of operational efficiencies and numbers that would be carrying out those rear operations. So whenever the civilians would be released and they went back to the villages, we found that the commanders on the front were getting stressed. And they were saying that we can't be arresting people for them to look at them as enemies, because you leave a village, within a kilometer, you're ambushed. They thought there was a linkage between the insurgents and the civilian population. So there was detection that if something radical is not done, these civilians were going to be killed. Nobody is going to be arrested anymore. So arresting 10,000, 15,000 people and putting them behind bars, they have got their rights. We knew they had their rights. But we knew that if the tension that was being noticed in the field operational commanders is not relieved in that respect, we were going to have a worse problem on our hands.
What would you say?
So when the areas were pacified, that's what he's talking about. That's when those who were called lodgers were released.
Okay.
But at least the stress which had been detected was diffused.
Would a commander in today say there is equally a lot of stress, depending on the intelligence being found at the moment? Realizing that
stress
just a minute
is when soldiers are getting killed in the field.
Just a minute. That you have a situation where the evolution of political crime has changed and escalated to terrorism, for example, which is a new phenomenon. Would the same explanations apply to a commander in charge today?
No, you see, even when there is stress, then you would see the operation methods which are being used. I mean, to arrest using a police vehicle, how does it help in relieving the stress? If you are going to use a numberless vehicle, how does it relieve the stress? It would be understandable if you are saying we hold them beyond the time within which they are supposed to be. Within the
48 hours provided for.
Exactly. Or if you put in place new laws like the Americans did during Guantanamo. They did that because they were dealing with a very, very complex situation. But at least they would admit that so-and-so has been arrested and they are being held officially. Because that's what there is.
We don't want to violate our own constitution, so we have held them on an off-site facility in Guantanamo.
Yes.
So,
but why do it as if it's a secret operation, as is being done when they use numberless vehicles?
Drones, as they have been called.
Other than to create fear. Two, nobody's getting killed on the side of those who are armed. I mean, the state security operatives. So you can't say that they feel so threatened that therefore that they are stressed and they are making the mistakes that are being made.
What about the attacks on the police stations, on the police posts?
That's war. So you fight back.
We've experienced them.
You equip the units to fight back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Captain Mike Mukula is watching us and says, very few people know what happened in Kasese and Bundibuju. I led the peace mission in Rwenzori region. However, the matter is in court and so it's sub judice. However, it has been deeply politicized. Honorable Minister, and then I'll come to Ssemuju.
What did he say? Yes, first of all.
That's what he said and that's what I heard.
General Muntu gives an impression that the support of the NRM is declining. I don't know where he gets the evidence. We don't have evidence to that effect because we've been going into elections for the different cycles, and the evidence is on the table on how NRM has been scoring. Have we had a run, for instance? We always win. So there is no panic within NRM, or there is no need whatsoever of saying that we are threatened at all. Number two.
Mubarak got 90-something percent before he was.
Please let the minister make his submission.
So I am telling you that the support of NRM is solid, and we are not worried. If you didn't know, is there an operation? You come from Toro. Are people being abducted in Toro? Because we all live in Uganda. Don't argue with us as if we are British or Europeans and we are visitors here. Are there abductions being made in northern Uganda, in eastern Uganda, in western Uganda, or even here in Uganda? The answer is no. Are people being arrested on the basis of suspicion of crime? Yes. And this happens everywhere. It is a crime that attracts police and security agencies to you, not the political party that you belong. I think there's a narrative which is being created especially by the new politicians here in Uganda to create a theme as if they are a threat to NRM and therefore their supporters are being arrested. And we're saying, you know, the other day the leader of opposition presented names in parliament of those they called abducted comrades. And we said, no, okay, we shall investigate because we must account for every Ugandan who disappears. And we indeed found some of them had been arrested by the state. Some of them are those who were killing police officers in the police posts. And I'm sure Ugandans have heard that story that there are armed people who have been killing police officers, whom now the opposition calls abducted comrades. And even we are ready to present a report in parliament. The opposition ran away from the report when the Prime Minister wanted to present. So really, this story of abductions is just a calculated move to soil government, hoping that maybe as we move towards 2026, Ugandans will be saying NRM abducts people. But we don't.
Honourable Minister, you've seen the photo that's been making rounds. I saw the Katikkiro of Buganda also tweeted on it. That gentleman who appears to have burn marks on his chest. What exactly do we know now? Who took him through that experience? He walked himself to the Uganda Human Rights Commission to lodge a complaint, meaning that he believes, and I think according to what we have seen so far, is that he was tortured at the hands of state security agencies.
That's the one where the spokesperson of defense was saying...
Oh, we don't know him, but...
I don't have details about that special case, but it should be investigated.
It could have been tortured in Congo.
Yeah, it can be possible. It can be inside Uganda. That should be specifically investigated. And like I said earlier on, if it is a state agent that has done that, then he or she should face disciplinary action because we do not condone torture of suspects irrespective of the crime you are suspected to have committed.
But also, just to respond to Honorable Ssemuju, Honorable Ssemuju, you know very well that in this country we have had not one, not two, a number of incidences, highly publicized, not by political parties, but by newspapers. In one case, I don't know whether Janan was still the commander of our army, where a newspaper published and said a woman her pubic hair was being shaved from Ugulu. The government took matter to court. Court found that it was a lie, it was a fabrication by that newspaper, or the people who were feeding the newspaper. The second one, that same newspaper...
You're referring to a woman called Candida Lapointe?
Yes. And you remember she was even jailed by court for telling lies to court. Two.
Did the court have any option?
Two. There was a second case where the same newspaper published and said LRA had shot down UPDF helicopter gunship in Kitgum. And we went with the editors of this newspaper, International, to search the area, the village they claimed. We did not find a wreckage.
Someone was arrested in that case. How was it concluded?
They were served by a constitutional petition, which is said where the courts, the Supreme Court of Uganda, I think Justice Mulwenga and others said lies, falsehood, and so on wasn't an offense. And so they got away. So it is possible that people can fabricate. Now, in the case of this Mwesigbo, the one who appeared to have been burnt on the chest, first of all, the investigation should be able to establish, is it actually a burn? By what method? By what means? And if so, by who?
For you, what
so therefore, therefore, without investigation, it remains an allegation.
So
and we are saying it should be investigated.
The question you're putting,
yes,
you speak for the state,
yes,
for the government.
Yeah, and that's why we are now happy. Personally, I'm now happy that this one, apart from running to NUP headquarters or to NUP leaders, he has gone to the competent authority, the Uganda Human Rights Commission. I want to believe the Uganda Human Rights Commission has capacity in coordination with other government agencies to come to the root cause. Who arrested him? When? Where was he tortured from? By whom?
Okay, fair enough.
So
let the minister conclude.
Two comments.
Yes.
One, is the longevity in the power the problem, the NRM having been leadership for long? The answer is no. NRM under President Yoweri Museveni. The answer is no. Are we forcing ourselves on Ugandans? No, it is Ugandans who vote for President Yoweri Museveni, who vote for us leaders who are here, and all the leaders. What General Muntu and his party should do is to sell their manifesto to Ugandans. If Ugandans in the future vote General Muntu, he will be sworn in as the president. But for you to say that we should feel ashamed of being voted by Ugandans, we shall not be ashamed of that. We shall continue. Then lastly, the issue of Kasese, I think the narrative must be given. We saw incidences where soldiers, including UPDF soldiers, who were being killed, those who were passing near the palace. And we had people who were armed. The government, including the president, rang the king several times and giving him time to surrender, that please let those forces surrender. To reach a level even where the king now refused to pick the president's phone. And the members of parliament were the ones misleading the king, please don't, the UN is coming here to fight on your side. There are forces coming from outside. Just members of parliament misleading. And they were given time, many hours to surrender. So it was a military confrontation. It is not true, yes. It's not true that UPDF went and started shooting at people in Kasese. These were armed people.
Yes. To be honest with you, there are things which, if you don't understand a situation,
no,
at least from the
it's not only you understand, all of us have
in that regard, don't try to defend the indefensible.
Don't claim that you are the only one who knows what happened in Uganda. We are all adults. We're all here. I may not be a soldier, but I went to school like you. So the issue of Kasese happened when all of us were around.
Yes, we were.
And these days you don't hide information from people.
Yes, and you are saying that they were shooting people who were passing from inside.
I'm saying before that incident, there are soldiers who were shot in front of the palace. True or false?
Once the army surrounded that palace, there was no longer that possibility that anybody could shoot.
No, but people inside were armed. True or false?
Were armed. The question was...
They were given time to surrender. They said no.
Anyway,
if you did, I'm now hearing you.
To be honest with you, you are government representatives. There are things you have to say in the open. I have no problem with that. My hope is that whatever defenses you put out there in the open, my hope is that there is a realization within those who are in power that there is something wrong and that you need to deal with it. Because if you don't deal with it, down the road it will become self-evident. The problem is that by the time it becomes self-evident, we all could be in a situation that we wouldn't desire to be in. We have seen regimes keep slowly moving to that point in the past. And those who are internal within those regimes, maybe we're also trying to make the same explanations you are doing. And we have seen the cost that there has been. My hope is that we have learned lessons from the past.
Yes, let me take a message from, let me just take a message from Musa Ladu, and then you'll continue from there. The mere fact that this regime is being compared or discussed with same bitterness as some of the most brutal regimes in the past is a telltale sign of evident cracks that should cause some sleepless nights to the likes of OO. I am surprised OO seems to find these claims amusing, if not political motivated, yet it is unfolding before his very eyes. Just wondering why he can see some of these obvious terrible blunders. Yes?
I think at the beginning, many people gave this government the benefit of doubt.
No.
But by its own conduct,
No.
many people have lost hope. When you lost a member of parliament, the Honorable Serena Nevanda, there was a process where Dr. Baryomusi represented us parliament.
True.
They shared samples to go and establish what had killed the MP. What happened? Dr. Nzivu and Baryomusi are being charged for stealing body parts that had been officially shared. And the government machinery, Chris, if you remember, how the government machinery was tarnishing you at that time. You should not be the one doing
and
that
we
job.
went to court and defeated the state.
Exactly, I am telling you.
We're not shot dead.
That the state and all its machinery, including Ofono Podo, your neighbor now, who is your junior in your ministry,
yes,
they were all accusing you of stealing body parts. Yet you remember, officially, you shared them, government took some body parts to go and investigate. On behalf of parliament, you, the people who are competent, also took some body parts. Resolved? The point I make that it is wrong, it is bad for you who has suffered now to be the one doing the job Ofono Pondo was doing at that time. So this government,
every talk show you'll have to raise the issue of Nevanda.
This government, I am only reminding you, I am only reminding you that I am only, Ofono, you had,
and at that time,
I know it is very painful. I am just reminding Chris that the whole state machinery was in the media, and Ofono Pondo here, they all are accusing you that you are destroying the body parts.
If he was doing something inconsistent with
the
government
things that you are saying about,
how did it end?
The things that you are saying about Kasese, the things that you're saying about
Kasese, how did it end?
They were wrong. This government was lying. You never stole those body parts.
They took us to court and went through the court process.
Don't miss the point. The point I am making.
There's no point you are making.
It is wrong for you to do the work that Ofono Pondo was doing against you just a few years ago. Now you are the one all over the media explaining away things that have happened.
I am a government spokesperson, you are not.
Yes, I sympathize.
Speak for the opposition.
I sympathize with you, Chris. No, the things that you are doing me, I cannot do.
You don't have to.
Because I remember I was in parliament. All government spokespersons, including this one here, they were already Baryomusi had stolen the body parts. Baryomusi had stolen the body parts. So now the same Chris Baryomusi is blaming. The same Chris Baryomusi is blaming victims in Kasese. These ones are being paraded by Nope. These ones are lying. These ones are doing this and that. For me, the point that General Muntu makes, and I agree with him, please, you who have authority, and unfortunately, I'm not even sure that I am speaking to people who have authority, because these things are not committed with their knowledge. Their only contribution is to go on radio and explain them. I am not sure that a meeting, if there was one that started to go and begin shooting people on Kampala streets during November, following the arrest of Honorable Bowen, I spoke, it's very painful. I don't want to say people's names. They will feel very bad. You are not in the government, Chris. You are just working with people who are in the government. That's why the other day when you were speaking about Moza, I don't know if you will ever repeat what you said. What Moza was doing was wrong.
It was wrong. Have I contradicted myself?
Oh, thank you very much. So the point I make is
that...
Have
I reversed my statement since then?
Today, you don't even know who to speak to. I am not sure that when I speak to Baryomusi, I'm speaking to government. I am not sure that when I speak to Ofono Pondo...
He's a cabinet minister in charge of information, of ICT and national guidance.
I agree entirely. He's a cabinet minister.
It is not your belief that makes me be part of government.
He's not part of those who are wreaking havoc. We know them, we all can pretend here. And therefore, those who can speak to them, please, you have a duty to go and speak to Mr. Museveni and his family and other agents who are wreaking havoc. Because you're all going to be...
Who are those agents?
I have said they
You've mentioned President Museveni and his family. Who are the others?
And his agents. I want to leave that at that.
So you are saying for us we are part of the decent part of government?
No, you are not part of decent. You are just a worker. You are a worker at a farm. You don't know what is taking place inside. but I don't know. Me, I think we've lost the opportunity. There was an opportunity. I remember when we were in Chankwan's as journalists covering the NRM meeting where the General Muntu spoke. At that time, I thought the president was listening. In fact, the conclusion of that meeting after Muntu's submission, the president looked like someone who was willing to listen. Today, he's going to justify every single mistake. When they beat and killed Yasin Kauma, he said the beating of Bobi Wine was very good. Yet someone had been shot there. When they shot people and killed them on Kampala Street, he said some stray bullets you are going to compensate. I actually don't know. Maybe the minister can help us and Ofono Pondo who speak for this government, because they said they had committed themselves to compensating
that statement
people.
From the president classified the victims of that shooting.
Were they compensated?
Some were demonstrators or rioters. Some were killed innocently. And those who were killed innocently would be compensated.
I'm asking them, were they ever compensated?
But we are the ones
if you are killed innocently.
We are saying we are not in the government, so how can we?
Why do you want answers from us?
I am asking you as workers, not as people in the government. You both of you are working for this government.
You look for the government and ask it. If you and ask it.
No, the government. You work for. You work Ofono Pondo. You work for this government. You're not in the government. You can pretend about it. The other day, I was with him when he was crying when his driver had been arrested. This one who is in the government. He was crying all over. My driver has been arrested. Would you cry if you were in the government?
The driver can't be arrested. That's what you are saying.
Chris Baryomusi, I have said Ofono Pondo.
Are you saying,
who knows where government sits?
Ssemuju.
He was also in the media crying.
Ssemuju, are you saying because I work for government, or I'm in the government can't injure me?
No, that is true. That is true.
Are you saying
you work for this government? You are not this government.
Are you saying the government can't injure my interest?
Of course it does.
And therefore, if it injures my interest, I shouldn't complain?
Okay.
There are those whose interest it cannot injure.
Can we get the discussion back to where it is supposed to be? And for our viewers, we're continuing this conversation on
your interest can be injured. But there are those whose interest cannot be injured.
Just a moment, hold it. I'll take a message from Bate Siraj. He's a member of the ANT in Nachifum, and he says, thanks for the show, but let Dr. and OO swallow their pride and apologies to Ugandans for the aggravated human rights violation